But there's a lot to do for a student who comes in for their first jazz lesson.
Absolutely. And I like that you touched upon this idea of just getting them used to the idea of playing something that isn't preordained. I think this is the hardest thing with anyone who's had any kind of classical training. I call this the linear rhizomic struggle, because when you learn to play a Chopin piece or something, how many correct ways are there through this piece? Well, there's one, every single right note, and anything that isn't on that correct line is wrong. It's a train wreck. So, it's like a set of train tracks. Just stay on the tracks and do everything. And rhizomes are grass, like the roots that spread rhizomically. And of course, improvisation is that. It's this constant branching off into something else. I actually think there's almost like a neurological problem when you've played classical music in this linear fashion for years and years. It's almost like you haven't developed the neurons that just not only can make decisions, but enjoy the process of making decisions. So I think simple exercises, like you mentioned, are crucial for classical players. You think about...
Go ahead.
Well, by the time somebody actually plays something for you, a Mozart piece or something, how many times have they played it in this identical way before they ever walk on stage and play it for you? It's really kind of shocking to think about how hammered into this one version this really is. And that's why the word recital kind of grosses me out a little bit. Because I love music so much. I'm very happy to recite some of my favorite stuff, just like I might recite a favorite poem, but that's not the only thing I want to do with the English language. I also want to have informal conversations and react to things in the moment, come up with clever insults for Jeremy, of course. And that's that decision-making, that spontaneous decision-making, which is a very, very different mental process. When I was first working on fugue several years ago, during the summer, I would practice fugue expositions for 2 hours every day. And my brain would actually hurt. My head would hurt. And I feel like it was like a muscle workout. It's painful to build these new muscles. It was building these new pathways of how to make these decisions in real time. So I think it's the same between our two disciplines, is just getting them free enough where they can go this way or that way at any given time.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to interject and say, I always tell I have quite a few classical pianist students who, want to transition or at least add to what they do. And I always tell them that they're courageous. Like, it takes so much courage for somebody, who's been a stage actor their whole life to go and try improv comedy, right? It takes a ton to go and try to immerse yourself in another language and another culture. It's tremendously, to me, courageous. And I think it's probably equally courageous for somebody to try classical or historical improvisation, even though it might be a little bit more in the style in the academy that they're used to. It still is this incredible leap of faith to do something where you might fail. And, I think one of my biggest challenges with students is they're so afraid of a wrong note. Yep. And part of the re-education that has to happen is to accept that and say, okay, we're going to think more about rhythm than this note, or to think about, well, if you can resolve a note, is it really wrong? Which, I think applies a little bit less to you than to me. But, to take away that fear of wrong notes. Of course, It's cliche to say nobody dies, when you play a wrong note, but it's so true that so many people are held back by the fear of pressing something down and having it, have that dissonance.
Yeah. And classical music is so driven by shame, honor and shame. And, the very best person, whoever it is, gets the honor and everybody else gets the shame. One of my students who's a dear friend of mine in Lithuania, we were talking about the Russian system. And he said, 10,000 pianists under unbearable pressure. And out the other end, you get one, Trifonov or, whoever. It's kind of,
after all the pressure.
Yeah, it's a kind of inhumane system. And They play beautifully for sure. But so I have students who are fairly well placed in the classical music world, faculty at conservatories, you'd know the names, members of big orchestras, conductors, and they're doing this very much under the radar. They wouldn't want it known they're beginners at something. Mm-hmm. And I respect that, of course. I keep their identity very, very secret and all of that. But yeah, there's a surprising number of people in high places who don't want it known that they are becoming like a little child, to learn something new.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's such an act of courage and faith. I love it. So I was going to ask you, I don't know, are you okay to go for a couple more questions?
I love it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So one of the questions that I get asked a ton is what a jazz practice session looks like. How do you actually sit down and practice jazz? I'm sure you've given some thought to, what a practice session looks like for somebody in the classical improvisation world. If I have an hour, let's say, a day to dedicate to becoming a great classical improviser, how would I spend that hour? What would I actually do?
It's a great question, and it very much depends on what you need to get done. I've seen you recommend all kinds of interesting things. Like, I think one time you said, play notes of a key, E flat or something. You have to play one on every eighth note beat, not in a pattern, like not up, down, and not predictable, but random. And you have to go for so long a time. And this is just to generate the ability to create material, because you have to have material in rhythm and you can't stop to fix it or doubt, or you just have to be able to spit it out like an auctioneer. Hands ahead, forward and half, forward and half. I thought that was brilliant, and it's very focused toward a specific task. And in my field, it's the same thing. What is it you really need to do? One of the big things is buying time. So that you can put off the next important decision and have time to think about what it should be. So if you look at how classical music is constructed, there are all these strategies for extending a harmony. Like take the Bach, the first prelude from the Well-Tempered Clavier, which I'm going to reach over here. That's a C major chord. It's arpeggiated upward twice in 5 voices, in 5 implied voices. I mean, it's a lot of time to waste reiterating a C major chord. You could have just gone chunk and gone on to the next measure. And the temptation in playing this is to sort of blurt out every event and then quickly run on to the next one. And the ability to delay and let this one have its own little moment in the sun and a nice rhythmic feel, that's actually a skill you really have to practice, similar to your E flat thing. So that would be one of them. Another thing, what I'm doing right now, I'm getting ready to improvise on the BACH motive, the spelling of Bach's name, which is really complicated harmonically because it's so chromatic. And I don't want to lock into one way of doing it. So I put on the metronome and I make myself improvise fugues in time, and everything is always scrambled. There's, different order of keys and a different order of events. And, sometimes I bring in the subjects high and then go low, and sometimes I'll do it the other way. And what I'm doing is I'm just getting used to every possibility, so I don't even really care what happens. And it will be in rhythm. It will have a feel. So it's just very specific to the type of problems one has. So let me throw the question back at you. Speaking of practicing, if you were going to practice, I heard you one time, one of my favorite things you ever did, you did an entire program, solo piano. You improvised on Paul Simon and Duke Ellington. And they were very unconventional. They were very free, not just find what the changes are and play solo over them. So what are you thinking about? Let's take Paul Simon. What are you thinking about when you get ready for something like that?
Yeah, well, thank you for saying nice things about that. I guess for me, especially in terms of solo piano, every piece is, and it feels cliche to say that every piece is different, but every piece is truly different in terms of the amount of improvisation that's going to happen. Some pieces in that program, and probably in just about any program that I'm going to do, have maybe some part that we would call a set piece, where I know at least 90% of the notes that I'm going to play, and I've practiced it so that, and part of the practice is similar to what a classical musician might do preparing for a recital, right? Make sure that you know the notes, make sure that you can play them convincingly, make sure that they're memorized, etc. Other pieces maybe would be played more like a jazz standard, right? Where maybe it's a ballad, maybe it's a swing piece, and I need to know the changes. I need to, at this point, probably for a program like this, I'm doing a lot of repetition. I have a share of exercises if I find myself stuck in a certain place that I might go to. And I'm happy to talk about some more specifics. And then some pieces, might be freer. In which case, again, I have like maybe a different set of exercises if I'm doing something where, I'm really starting from a harmonically free place or a rhythmically free place. So I'd have to kind of take each of those, problems a little bit differently. But I'll share some of the things that I, might do. One of my favorite exercises, if I'm feeling stuck on a kind of standard kind of piece, is to play just with my pinkies and thumbs so that I know I'm playing only 4 voices. And it's a really helpful limitation to me to hear the music linearly rather than to think about the stacked kind of chord symbols. I might practice with just 2 voices, just one in my right hand, one in my left hand, again, to get out of whatever harmonic habits. I might transpose the piece to some different keys. Yeah. I might have told you, it's one of my favorite things that I've heard, that my teacher, Fred Hirsch, says that he will not play a piece in a solo recital in the key he's going to play it in until he gets on stage, because he wants that key to feel really fresh to him when he gets on stage. Yeah. And transposing is such a key exercise because it gets the intellectual side going, it gets the ear going, and it gets your fingers into different positions. So maybe you find a voicing that you haven't found before, or you find, a melodic pattern that wouldn't occur to you in E, but it sits so well in F that now you feel like you can bring it in, that, it's kind of activating something for your ear. I do a lot of what my teacher called outlining, which is playing only the notes playing only one chord every 4 beats. I'm seeing, okay, can I make a really beautiful connection just every 4 beats? And then increasing to, okay, now I'm going to put something in every 2 beats. Okay, now I'm going to try something every quarter note. So that instead of building something that, is just going in straight linear, you're kind of building from the outside in, or maybe I should say from the inside, from the core of the harmony, from the core of the expression outwards. So as I'm getting ready for a solo recital, those are some of the exercises that I'll do. Other things, right now I'm about to go off to the Vail Jazz Festival, and I know that there's going to be some tune that's just way faster than I like to play generally. And so every day I'm starting my metronome at half note equals 125 and putting on a timer for 3 minutes and choosing a tune, and then bringing up the half note until I get to 175, so 350 beats per minute. And just practicing, teasing myself further and further into a faster tempo so that I'm not completely overwhelmed as I get on stage and have to play some stupidly blazing fast tempo. So those are some of the things that I do at this point in my career if I'm preparing for a performance or preparing for a recital.